everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be part 2 of my Goodreads Choice Award show that I do. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll explain what it is down below. Essentially, we're going through each category that I've read a couple books in on the Goodreads Choice Award of 2019. I'm giving you my own reviews and letting you know, did the winner deserve to win, or did another nominee that I've read deserved it more? It's not that serious, but it's always fun to go through them. So, we left off, and I was about to start talking about best sci-fi, which is one of my favorite category, and I ended up reading 9 books. You'll see why I say that. So the winner was also the one that I had originally voted for because I read it in 2019, and it was Recursion by Blake Crouch. I love his newest work. That one, Dark Matter, fantastic books that you literally cannot put down. Interesting topics, science-y thrillers are just my jam. And I really didn't expect the book to go in the direction that it did, but I was pleasantly surprised. I do think the least you know the better, but you're following 2 main storylines. The first one is a detective trying to figure out why there's been a huge amount of people trying to kill themselves because they have false memories. They keep saying that I'm not living my right life right now, kind of thing. So that's the first one, and then you're following this neuroscientist who is trying to develop a technology to help people with Alzheimer, for example, remember their lives and some of their memories. That's all I'm saying. Also, I do think that that would make a great movie if they can manage to do that, because I would totally watch it. So I'm not unhappy with that winner, but let's go through the other ones to see if something was better. In third position, I also read that book, I actually just finished it, and it is Gideon Tonight. And I kept having to remind myself it was sci-fi. For some reason, I kept wanting to think of it as a fantasy book. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. Interesting world. I tried to describe it, and I feel like I'm starting to sound like I'm talking about Hunger Games. It's like you're following 2 people from the night being sent with people from, you know, the first house, blah, 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 second, third, to compete, basically trying to solve something to have access to become a bigger, badder magician. This is a terrible description. I did enjoy how the 2 main characters actually don't like each other. That made it interesting. The superpowers, I guess, since it's sci-fi, magic superpower, they were interesting, and I'm very curious to see in what direction it's going to be. However, I do want to mention that the main character, Gideon, she's unlikable, but not in like a good way. I feel like she was very angsty, like swearing all the time to a point where it felt a bit forced in my opinion. Although that ending, I'm kind of confused. Where's it gonna go? Speaking of confusing, this is how you win the time war. This is one of these books where I feel like it's so lyrical that I almost feel like a lot of it goes over my head. Does anybody else feel the same? It's a love story between 2 women. Can we even call them women? Let's just call it sapphic love. I think that's probably the closest thing I could say. You follow the story of 2 time-traveling agents who leave each other love notes. And things develop. But it has to be one of the weirdest books that I've read, but not necessarily in a bad way, but just in a very confusing way. But if you're into books that are written really beautifully, like whimsical, and more about character-driven stories that, again, are a little vague and you're okay with it, I do think you would overall really enjoy it. Personally, I have mixed feelings about it. I didn't hate it, but it's definitely not my usual jam. The next book I ended up reading in that category is like number 8, Exhalation, which is my second time reading a short story collection by the author. He's the author that wrote the story that the Arrival movie was based on. Brilliant concepts. In this one, it's almost a bit Black Mirror-ish. I feel like a lot of the stories were kind of possible things that science could do in the future that could affect us, kind of thing. And it was overall really nice. I did enjoy it. I do want to read more by him. Whenever he comes out with more, I will absolutely read it. So definitely something to check out if you are intrigued. The next one that I've read was The Test by Sylvain Neuvel, which is the first book that I've read by him that wasn't part of the Sleeping Giant series. This is also very Black Mirror-ish. I feel like I should do a video about it whenever they come out with the new season. This is a immigration test that people have to go through to, in the future, end up becoming UK citizen. And the test isn't really quite what you think it is, kind of thing. And it goes in a intense direction that I wasn't expecting. And again, we're going to keep this vague because it's about 100 pages. So just pick it out. Just do it. It was wild. The next book is my baby. Like, let's just say it right now, it's the one I'm voting for. To Be Thought If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I have been raving about this book ever since I picked it up, and I am definitely not done doing that because it's amazing. You follow the story of 4 astronauts who are sent to this different solar system where they have to try and find some form of life, like anything that would prove life exists. So they're exploring a few different planets and moons. The book starts by saying, please read this. Like, if you don't read anything else that we've sent you, please read this. Basically, you know something happened, you just don't know what. And as always with Becky Chambers, fantastic, character-driven, almost wholesome story for sci-fi. It's not something you see often. And again, great representation. You really care about the characters in the story, and things went a bit more sciencey than expected from her, but in a good way. I still feel like it was super accessible for everyone. I'm gonna keep it at that. I'm actually planning on rereading this in December, since I don't really read, because that's usually when I post a ton of videos about my best and worst of the year. So I either read more nonfiction or reread books. And like, as soon as I put it down, I wanted to reread it. I don't do that ever. So definitely something very special in my opinion. I know a lot of you started picking it up and enjoying it, which makes me feel so good. It's very short. It's like 200 pages. You need to check that out. It was just fantastic. The next book is the one I was saying, read. Wanderers by Chuck Wendig. I officially DNF'd the book at 80%. I just couldn't do it anymore. It's about 800 pages and it's like about 300 too long. Like, it's just way too long. I've read a lot of post-apocalyptic books. It used to be my thing when I started Booktube, basically. And I've realized that none of them end up becoming favorites, I feel like. Like, First Contact with Aliens, which I'm still on a kick for, so many of them became all-time favorite books. And this one was just another one that reminded me of why I didn't care about these post-apocalyptic ones, because there's this long walk, which reminds me of, again, 10 other different ones. The only thing is, I thought the artificial intelligence twist to it was interesting, and part of me was intrigued to just see how it ends. But I went through it as an audiobook from the library, and it was like 32 hours long, and it got returned twice. So I've had the book for like 42 days and didn't manage to finish it. I got it a third time and I just realized I don't want to. So we're not torturing ourselves in 2020, and I just don't care for it. Another book that I just didn't really connect to it, so it's a me thing definitely, is A Memory Called Empire, which I don't even know how to describe that one. You follow a character who is an ambassador to a different planet that is sent to replace the ambassador that was before, because they die in mysterious circumstances. I feel like it was a lot more political intrigue than I expected. I just really didn't connect with the story or the characters, so I didn't really care when things were happening. It is what it is. Next book, Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the second book after Children of Time, which I absolutely loved. So I was very excited, although a bit nervous to read that one, because I didn't know how it would go, because the first one is a great standalone. I didn't even know that it was going to be a second book, and I believe the author said that he tends to write his book as standalones, and if they do well, he continues. So the first one is about battle between humans and intelligent spiders. We're keeping it vague. Super unique. The ending did not see that coming in a really good way. And then you have the second book, which starts after the first book, so I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a First Contact with Aliens where the aliens are octopuses, so intelligent jellyfish. I feel like a lot of parts were 5 stars for me. Interesting exploration of some ideas, but then some of the parts I kind of found myself a little bored. So I feel like if you read it, you're gonna possibly agree that some bits were definitely more interesting than other ones, and the ending is left open. I believe there's going to be a third one, but I'm a little torn if I'm going to read it or not, just because the second book was just so all over the place for me. So yeah, interesting premise, interesting concepts, but some parts were just a bit boring. Didn't expect that. Then we have Best Horror section. The first one was the winner, which was The Institute by Stephen King, and at the time, I remember being mad about it because the book was like recently published and so many people voted for it. And like, you know that once again, they did not read it. They were just voting for it because Stephen King, because frankly, it's not a horror book. It's just not. I do think it was an overall really good book from him. You're following these kids who have like these powers, I guess, like paranormal power, and they are sent to this institute. And I did overall really enjoy it. It didn't really feel like one of his usual books. So overall solid read. And quite frankly, because all of the other books that I've read in this category were let down, it will have to be my winner. I technically read 4 other books in this category, but 2 of them I DNF'd. So Not a good sign. And the two of the ones were fairly short, and one of them was okay, the other one, ugh. So very, very quickly, because I'm tired of complaining, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing me complain. The first one is Imaginary Friend, which was a humongous book, and I started it, and I realized that following children and horror stuff when nothing happens, I don't really care about it. Then I went ahead and read some reviews about it, and people were saying that it became weirdly religious, so I just put it down. I don't remember how far I was into it, like 30-40%. Not worth it. Then I read The Invited, which, really interesting premise. You're following this woman who goes to live in this like isolated new house, and they're renovating it, and things happen, like think possible witches, which I was into that part. Overall, it was a mediocre book, like nothing wrong with it, nothing amazing with it. It was like a 3 stars, It was fine, and because the other ones I really didn't care for, this would be in second place. I attempted to read Growing Things by Paul Tremblay, and officially this year I did a video where I was talking about authors I'm not planning on reading more by them. Easy in there, because I just don't like his stories. This one, I couldn't even finish it. They're short stories. It's a short story collection, and I couldn't finish it. So that's not good. And then last but not least, Denite by Ellen Phillips. This was one of the weirdest books that I've ever read, but not in a good way. You follow this woman, and weird things are happening. She's a mom. This is also what I mean by I don't really care about following family drama, because a lot of the book was all about her kids, and I listened to that one as an audiobook, and I remembered a specific scene. I was in the shower, and the kids are saying mom literally 50 times, and I just could feel my uterus just shriveling up and die. And I just never want to do that to myself again. But if you like really weird books, you might enjoy that one, because I can't even say anything about the premise without ruining it. And it's a quick read, and the ending left me saying what the actual... But I'm confused still. I didn't like it though. It wasn't a good confusing. Next we have Best Humor, which I read Dear Girls, and I like the author. I think she's funny, and I enjoyed the parts where she was talking about how she struggled as a Asian American to make it into comedy, and a few of the things she mentioned in her past. These parts were good, but I didn't really realize that the book was technically her telling like her life, but advice and love stuff to girls. Which Dear Girls should have been the hint. But I just went into it because it was the winner in that category, and I really didn't care. Like, I went from a few good things, a lot of mad things, and a few things I was like generally not agreeing and not liking. So yeah, overall it was kind of a letdown, and since it's the only one that I've read and didn't care for it, I'm not voting in the Best Humor category. I don't think it's going to be a category that I read from ever again. Then we have Best Nonfiction. I was at first supposed to read the winner, but then I realized who the author was, so I decided not to do that. So I was supposed to read the second place, which was Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered, but I kind of wanted to listen to the podcast first a little bit, just to get more familiar with the authors, which I did not have time to do that. And I thought I actually read none of these books this year, but it's not true. I did read one and did enjoy it, and it is How to Be an Anti-Racist, which you're following the story of it's a nonfiction. You're following the author explaining kind of his journey into learning about racism and anti-racism, and how he perceives it as if you're not actively supporting anti-racist philosophy, laws, whatever, then it means that by being complacent and not doing anything, you're being racist because you're supporting them with your silence. And he explained it in a very interesting way. I did really enjoy it, and I do want to read more by the author. So again, I've read only one book, so I can't really say who's the winner is, but it was a solid read and I do recommend it. Originally, I was supposed to read one in Best History, but I started it and didn't care for it, so we're just gonna skip next to Best Science and Technology. In this category, I've read actually a couple, and I was planning on reading more, but again, lack of time, but I did read 4. And frankly, I enjoyed all of them. Finally, as I'm sure we're all thinking. The only thing is I don't agree with the winner. So, the winner was Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, which in my opinion should have been in the children category. Bear with me. It is a nonfiction. The author is a mortician, and she's answering questions about that from children. And I listened to it as an audiobook. I do recommend it. It's very short. It's like 3-4 hours. But she's saying it as she's responding to kids, which I feel like it would have been more interesting to go into more depth into these kind of topics. But again, I understand that I just wasn't the audience, so that's why I'm saying it should have been in the children category. So yeah, interesting, not premise, interesting topic, but just shouldn't have won, in my opinion. It wasn't for me. for kids, it's probably good. Then we have Invisible Women, which I've talked about it a lot, so I'm going to go quickly. But if you want to read a fascinating but incredibly frustrating book about how there's a huge data bias for women in science, not just science really, in everything, she gives so many amazing examples. I highly recommend you pick it up, but I can't talk about it anymore. I'm just so annoyed every time. But like even things like, you know how like seat belts in your car, women have a higher chance of getting injured or die because it's not made for our body. Because, you know, 50% of the population just doesn't exist and doesn't matter. Or even like tests for new medication. It's not tested on women because we have hormones and that would reduce the success rate. This is why I'm done talking about it. The next one I really loved, and it is The Body by Bill Bryson. I think it's gonna be my winner, I think. I do feel like it's an interesting beginner's guide to like biology, I guess. The author goes through the whole human body and gives you a little bit of information about everything, but not in a sense of like, oh, what this part of your body does, but more like where we are at discovery-wise about some of these things. And a lot of these I didn't know about, and I thought it was, again, very accessible yet still interesting, and enjoyed it quite a bit. I gave it 5 stars, and I don't tend to really rate my nonfiction, but that one deserved it, so my winner. And then last but not least, I also read Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming, basically a book about warming, basically a book about climate changes. Whew, that took me a while. I just listened to that one as an audiobook, and I did overall enjoy it. The author begins on a pretty optimistic note, which that took me by surprise. It doesn't sound like it's a topic that should be that positive considering where humanity is going. But in his opinion, just because we are the ones responsible means that we should be able to fix it. It goes a little darker afterwards, which obviously we're expecting. Basically some possible things that could happen, some things that we can do. And overall, it was a pretty solid read. I haven't read a lot of books about the topic, but some of the information was quite horrifying. And warning, if you're not in a good place right now, probably don't read this book. It's definitely negative. But he mentioned like pandemics and stuff like that because it was written last year, 2019. So every time my heart would be doing like, oh no. So just wanting to warn people. So yeah, overall interesting read. Yeah. Best debut novel. Basically, I've read 6 books in this category, but I've already talked about all 6 of them in this video or the one beforehand. So if I have to choose a winner, it would have to be between Miracle Creek and Gideon. I don't know which one to choose, but those are the 2 that I liked. Best Young Adult, Fantasy, and Sci-Fi. This is one of the categories that I had a few that I really wanted to read, including The Toll, which I'm still in the middle of. Eventually I will finish it. But I just didn't have as much time to finish books as I thought I would because, again, I had such a big slump earlier this year, and I've read about 30 books less than I usually do in a year, so it affected this category. With that said, the winner was The Wicked King by Holly Black, and I personally really didn't care for The Cruel Prince, so I didn't read the second book in this series. I have read Sorcery of Thorns, which really took me by surprise. I read it because it was a standalone fantasy, YA fantasy, and it was receiving some hype, and I wanted to give it a shot, and it was actually a lot better than I expected. I feel like I'm distancing myself more and more from YA because I find a lot of them disappointing. So from now on, I feel like I'm only going to be reading the ones that I feel like get a lot of hype just to see if they work for me, because sometimes I do still find favorites, so I'm still open to reading some. So in this one, interesting magic system and a magical library. And this girl, main character, wants to work there, and yes, I'm all for it. So like I said, unique, took me by surprise. There's not too much romance, and it doesn't overpower the whole story. The ending, I was kind of less into it than some of the people, but overall, pretty solid read. If you are into YA fantasy, that one is worth a shot. The other one, The Secret Commonwealth by Philip Pullman. I think this is the book, I don't know if it's the #1, but definitely up there, book that made me the angriest this year. I have been looking forward to reading this book literally forever. I adored his Dark Materials, his first trilogy that he wrote years ago. I read them as a kid, loved them, and reread them 2 years ago. It was part of my big books reading challenge, and I read all 3 books. It was part of like this gorgeous edition. Look how beautiful that is. So this is like all 3 books of this first trilogy, and absolutely fell in love with it all over again, because I feel like as a kid a lot of it went way above my head, and there's obviously a whole nostalgia thing here. Super interesting. I know there was some controversy whenever it came out because it was anti-religion. It's actually not. It's more like against organized religion. Not quite the same thing. I'm not going to go in any more details, but yes, interesting world, magic system, characters, and the second companion series that he started. Book 1 was a prequel, and then we have finally this one, who is a sequel. And I was saying I've been waiting all my life to read this because the main character, Lyra, from the first series is part of this one, and she's 20. And I've been wanting to see her as an adult forever. I'm keeping this video spoiler free. You can either check out my Goodreads review, you can click to see the spoilers, or I'll talk about it in my either worst or most disappointing books of the year. I still need to decide. But I had so many issues. It was kind of hard to see some characters fighting. That was cute, you know, but it felt so incredibly pointless. The book is not going anywhere. There's this mystery happening that seems very whimsical and vague, and you just don't see where this is going, what's the point of it. I had a lot of like negative issues for some stuff that really should not exist in this book. Like, what was the author thinking? Really problematic stuff. And I can understand the idea of like people growing up and, you know, exiting the magic of childhood, and how do you balance, you know, that with becoming more like a scientist, I guess. I'm stretching it to try to make it make sense, basically, and it doesn't. It took me like 3 months to finish it, like for a book that I thought I was going to love. That's not good. And when I finished this, I was super disappointed, and I feel like the more time passes, the more angry I am. Like, I'm actively mad, you know? I'm not just disappointed. Anyway, I'm curious to hear your reviews on the books that I've talked about today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe. I am telling you right now that there will be some changes for next year because so many disappointing books. Like, I know we all enjoyed like Rent reviews at times, but I feel like so many of these were just disappointments, period. And for a while I was wondering, is it just because, you know, lockdown, pandemic, I've been in a mood? But quite frankly, I just feel like a lot of them were just not that great. It happens. And to be honest, I do like to read newer books to let you know which ones are worth it or not. So obviously, if you're reading a bunch of books that don't have reviews yet, it will happen that you will be not liking more of them than if you just pick up the ones that have like rave reviews. Does that make sense? Why are there so many birds? On the bright side, I'm looking forward to my 2021 reading challenge for this, and also definitely subscribe because all my end of the year's videos are coming. Most surprising, most disappointing, best and worst books that I've read, and a few different categories like that. So excited for this video. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will see you in my next one very soon. Bye.